Hey y'all, it's Robin. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am doing another episode of my recent reads. So we are going to go through the 12 books that I read recently. I try to keep these to a manageable size so that I can go more in depth. That way I'm not trying to talk about 25 books at the end of every single month. I have 12 books that I read recently. Some of these have been featured in previous videos, so I will try to keep those reviews relatively short, but let's just get right into everything that I read. First up was Captivating by Onley James. This was book 2, I believe, in her Elite Protection Services series. I think that's what it's called. But this was, I believe this was her first series, if I'm not mistaken. And I have really enjoyed this book. I have since binged the entire series, but this second book was following Elijah, and Elijah is a Hollywood superstar and he has a very dark past, and in this one he has a romance with his bodyguard. All of these are bodyguard romances. This is an romance, and this one also has some tie-in to her Necessary Evils series. So all of Onley James's books are kind of tied together. They all take place in the same universe. And so we meet some characters in this that are referenced in the Necessary Evil series. So if you love the Necessary Evil series and you haven't gone back and read this first series, I highly recommend it. But this one, like I said, is following Elijah, who is a Hollywood star. When him and Shepard meet, they form this friendship and instant attraction, and the two of them form a romance, and it is really cute and sweet. Shep is hiding something, and the two of them have a steamy romance together. I really liked this one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. I will say that book 1 is still my favorite in this series, but I did very much so enjoy this one. I also read Exasperating, which was the next book, which is following Robbie, and Robbie was the fake boyfriend of Elijah from book 2, and this is Robbie and Calder's romance. So Robbie is another like Hollywood star, but he has a very intense past. Robbie comes from a cult, and I liked the two characters. I liked Calder, I liked Robbie, I liked their dynamic. I really liked their romance together. I liked a lot of the things that were happening in here. However, the plot of this one did not work for me. It did not work for me. This got very weird at the end. So the cult ends up coming into play, like a big part of this ends up being culty at the end. And I hated the epilogue. Like straight up, I am pretending that that epilogue never happened. In my head, not canon, never happened. I did not like that epilogue. Like I said, there were parts of this that I really liked. Like I liked Robbie a lot. I wanted him and Calder's romance to be as epic as it was in my head. And the plot, the cult just took over too much of this, and I hated the ending. So after that, I read Without You by Marley Valentine, and I gave this one 5 stars. This is an author that I have read from before, and I am going back and reading her backlist. And this one was recommended, this author was recommended to me by Chip from Books Over Bros. He will be linked down below, but he has been talking about Marley Valentine over on his Bookstagram, and I get a lot of my queer romances from Chip's Instagram. And so I went back and read this one, and this one was so good. I will say Marley Valentine's books are very emotional journeys. In this one, we are following two of our heroes, and one of them was the boyfriend, significant other to our other hero's brother, and the brother passes away from cancer, and it kind of brings the two characters together. The boyfriend has kind of put his life on hold. He gave up everything to be with his significant other, and now he does not know how to move on with his life. Meanwhile, his brother feels kind of ostracized from his family. He feels like his family has fallen apart without his brother. He's always kind of had an estranged relationship with his mom, and he feels like the loss of his brother has kind of torn them even further apart, and he doesn't know how to be around his family anymore, and him and the ex-boyfriend come together, kind of help each other grieve and move on, and they eventually form a relationship. There's a lot of difficult things in here. Like I said, there's death of a loved one, there is cancer, there are homophobic remarks in here, but it is very emotional, very well written, and I fell in love with these two characters so much. This does have a found family aspect to it as well. So if you like emotional romances, definitely check this one out. But I give this one 5 stars. It made me cry. And any book that can elicit that sort of emotional reaction always ends up getting a higher rating. And so this one made me cry a lot, so definitely one that I really loved. Next is All Fired Up by Dylan Newton, and I just talked about this in my spring wrap-up, which I will link up in the cards as well as in the description box, so I'm not going to go into it a lot here, but I gave this one like 3.5 stars. I liked the first book in this companion series more, which is how sweet it is, and this one is a one-night stand second chance romance, and there were parts in here that I thought were really cute and really sweet, but I didn't particularly love the conflict and how it was resolved, so it was just kind of hit or miss. It was cute, it was fun, but not an all-time favorite. After that was Soul Eater by Lily Mayne, and this is the first book in a monster romance series, and I gave this one 4 stars. This was really good. I didn't know how to feel about this when I first went in, but I had read a review on this book that said that they gave it 1 stars because it was just sex and killing demons, and so I had to go into it, and this was really good. We are following our hero in a post-apocalyptic world, and after losing his mom, he has nothing left and he doesn't know what to do, so he ends up going into the military. And right at the beginning of the book, he is sent on a mission to where he is essentially bait. And he thinks like, oh my god, we're all gonna die. And he gets there and he freezes and doesn't attack the monster that arises. And he wakes up back at the military base, and the only person that the monster is willing to talk to is our hero. And it is the two of them forming a romance, and it is so good. I love me a good monster romance, and this one was great. I will say that it did get a little long, like right at the 3/4 mark, because they kind of do the same thing a couple of times, and I wish one of those times had kind of been cut out, but I really liked this. I want to continue on with the series. After that, I went into A Cruel and Fated Light by Ashely Shuttleworth, and I also gave this one 5 stars. This is the sequel to A Dark and Hollow Star, and this is this really epic, long YA fae fantasy, and this series has a huge cast and it is convoluted, and there's a bajillion things happening in here, and I love every second of it. It is so good. I think the series is so well crafted. I know that this isn't everyone's favorite, but there is something about the like really slow moving character based fantasy that I really dig it. And the last like 200-ish pages of this book took 10 years off my life because so much happened and so much was revealed, and I'm obsessed with this series. I need the next book more than anything. After that, I picked up Neighborly by Katrina Jackson, and this has been a book that has been on my TBR forever, and this was, I think, the first book that I picked up in June for Pride Month, and it was the perfect way to start my Pride Month reading. This is a romance between two couples. The two women are very attracted to each other, and they have this like instant connection, and there is so much pining, and there is so much like tension build up. There are these scenes they have like this little shed that one of our heroines is turning into an art studio, and there are so many like stolen glances and brushing of arms, and it was so steamy. I read a lot of romance, so it takes a lot to elicit that sort of reaction, but I was blushing like so hard through this entire book. It was so well written. I loved these couples. The communication between these couples was top tier. Top tier. We love couples who support and love each other through everything. And like the way that these heroes adored their significant others, I loved this. I loved this a lot. I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read Criminal Intentions by Cole McCade. I kind of picked this one up on a whim. I was looking for some more queer audiobooks, and this came up on some sort of recommendation, I think on Scribd, and I just kind of decided to download and listen to it, and I gave this one 4 stars. This was so good. I'm trying to dip my toe into other subgenres because I tend to read a lot of the same romance subgenres, and this is more romance, suspense, mystery, and I'm trying to dip my toe into romantic suspense, and I loved this. I will say this is very light on the romance in this first book. It is, from what I have heard, the romance is very slow burn. So we only get one little drop of romance right at the end, and it's torn away from you. But in this, we are following our 2 heroes who are both detectives, and one of the heroes is new to the force, and they get paired together for this case. And the reason that they are paired together is because both of them are requesting this case because it is the death of a queer man, and both of them are queer as well. And so they both asked to be put on the case, and so they get teamed up together. It is so good. I loved the mystery. The mystery itself was fantastic. The audiobook of this is so good. And the tension between our 2 characters, because they both want to be working on this case, and like they both have a lot in common, but they purposefully don't want to like each other. Like they have like decided like we are not going to be friends, and then they will like get along, and then they'll like both start pulling back. And I just loved that dynamic, them like insisting like no, we are not going to like each other, and then slowly, reluctantly liking each other. Like I said, there is one tiny little drop given to you at the end of the romance, and then it's immediately ripped away. So don't go into this expecting a romance, but apparently the romance does develop throughout the series. I do plan to continue on with the series. I've already added the entire series to my Amazon wish list, and by the entire thing I just mean season 1. Apparently this is 29 books long. I did not know that this is a 29 book series currently. That is a lot of books. Next up is You and Me by Tal Bauer, and this has kicked off a new Tal Bauer obsession of mine. I give this 5 stars. This is going to be one of my favorite books of the entire year. I absolutely loved this book. This is following 2 single dads. They live in Texas, and they both have sons who are on the football team, and one of the heroes lost his wife within the last year, and they had a very strained relationship, and that strained relationship has moved to him and his son, and they essentially live like strangers in their house. He has no idea what's going on in his son's life, and he is desperate to find a way to reconnect with his son, and he decides that he is going to volunteer for his football team. And so he shows up at the practice, and he meets this other single dad. His son is the quarterback, and it turns out that his son is best friends with our hero's son, and the 2 of them come together and form a friendship, eventually start to fall in love. And this love story is so ridiculously epically beautiful. It is one of those books where as you're reading it, like there isn't a lot of like really sad, traumatic things happening, but I felt so much for these characters that I was on the verge of tears for like half the book. The way that our hero is trying to reconnect with his son is beautiful. The way that he is trying to connect with this new guy in his life is beautiful. The trauma that these families are going through, and you cannot help but root for all of these characters. I talked about this when I read Still Beating, but this is one of those books that you read and you're like, these 2 were straight up soulmates. Straight up. Like these people were always meant to find each other. And I just, like I said, I cried through the last half hour of this book, and I am now on a Tal Bauer binge. So be prepared to see a lot of his books and more of my recent reads. After that, I read The Complicated Hearts Duet by Ashely Jade, and when I tell you that this was a roller coaster, the first book I gave 4 stars, and the second book I gave 1.5 stars. This book opens up with our 3 main characters. We are following our heroine, who ends up having in high school this epic romance with this guy who is a football star, and she is kind of like the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. She lives in a trailer park with her deadbeat dad, and the guy that she has a romance with is wealthy football star. Classic. They have a breakup, and it is traumatic for them both. And now flash forward to when they're in college, she has a new guy that she is finally starting to open up to, and she goes on a trip to Europe, decides that she is going to break up with this guy even though she has fallen for him because she is still grieving the relationship from high school. When she goes away to Europe, our 2 heroes meet each other, the guy from her past and her new guy, and they form a romance, and it is the tangled mess of the 3 of them. This first book was over the top and kind of ridiculous, and there was a lot of stuff thrown in, but I really liked the romances. Like I liked the characters. They were all super flawed and unlikable, but somehow I still liked them all together, and I really enjoyed the tension and the angst of that first book. Book 2 is the aftermath of the 3 of them coming together and everything blowing up around them, and it was not it. Not it at all. It has a lot of plot points. Let me just start off there. There's too much in this book. There's way too much in this book. Not only is there a poly romance in here, but I didn't feel like the romance itself was handled well. I didn't feel like the poly romance was handled well. I didn't feel like mental health was handled well. There is this little mental health thing that is like thrown in for one of the heroes, and it's just like dropped in there and never addressed again. Trigger warnings for suicidal ideation that is just like randomly dropped in here. And then there is a entire plot about one of our heroes, his father, being homophobic and abusive, so there's trigger warnings for abuse. There is a side plot of one of the brothers who is a gambling addict. There is another like side character who has a surprise baby. There is cheating. There is a plot in here where one of the guys is being blackmailed. There is a forced sexual assault in here. It was too much. There was too much. And then at the end, there is huge trigger warnings because at the end, there's a school shooting. And I was just like, why did you feel the need to put everything? It was like you just like threw marbles that had like random tropes right in them, and whichever one landed inside the circle, you had to use them all. Like you didn't need to use everything, every idea that popped into your head. And it just, the more I talk about this book, the more I hate it. I hated the second book. I hated it. I hated it. I hated it a lot. I'm sorry for ranting. I don't recommend this. I loved the Devil Duet. Don't read this Duet. And see, now I got myself started. There is a spin-off of this called Complicated Parts, or it is a romance between one of the heroes' brother who falls in love with the lesbian best friend, and I refuse to read that. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And then the final book, ending on a much better note, is Everything for You by Chloe Liese, and I gave this one 5 stars. I am officially obsessed with the Bergman brothers, and I want Chloe Liese to write books in this series forever. Forever. I absolutely loved this. This is following Oliver, who is one of the youngest sons. He is one of the man cubs, and this opens up with him in college. He's playing soccer for UCLA, and he has just gotten out of a relationship that completely broke his heart. It was with one of his teammates, and he makes a decision right at the beginning of this book to give up college and go pro because the LA Galaxy is trying to recruit him, and so he decides to go pro. And this jumps forward 4 years into the future, and Oliver is playing for the LA Galaxy and his career is just taking off, and he has a new teammate, Gavin, who was one of the soccer players that he idolized growing up. Gavin's career is coming to a close. He's been injured a lot, so this book deals with chronic pain as well as mental health. Ollie struggles with panic attacks and anxiety, and it is it is a grumpy sunshine, enemies to lovers romance, and it is so good. This has a lot of really good romance tropes, and it is so self-aware of its romance tropes, and I loved that. Right at the beginning of the book, you can tell that these two are kind of being forced together, and they go to like an away game or something like that, and they walk into the room and there's only one bed. They start talking about how they are in a romance book and it was really cute. I loved these characters. I loved the depiction of chronic pain. The depiction of panic attacks was fantastic, and I loved this a lot. I just cannot get enough of this family. I love the Bergman brothers. This is another one that is great. Absolutely fantastic on audio. Chloe Liese really goes out of her way to make fantastic audiobooks, and I loved it. I loved this one so much, and I cannot wait for the next two books in this series. Chloe Liese has mentioned that there might be a spin-off of this series, and I really hope so, because I love this family so much and I don't ever want it to end. I don't know what I will do with myself when I no longer have Bergman Brother books to read. So that is it for my recent reads. That is all 12 books that I read. I had a really good reading year despite that one and a random couple of duds. I've had so many 5-star books, so many favorites, and I'm really picking up some good books lately. So let me know if you have read any of these. Let me know what books you have read, if they have been hits or duds, and I will catch you all in my next video. Bye.